like the rushing of a mighty wind, like the rushing of a mighty wind.
You go back to the original founding fathers, they intended this to be a European nation for white men of good stock and character.
So, can you show me, let me answer the question. Can you show me where in the United States Constitution it says that?
It wasn't in the Constitution.
It wasn't in the Constitution because they didn't believe it.
It's not in the Constitution because they didn't believe it. So the only thing that the founding fathers believed is what was written in the Constitution. Outside of the Constitution, they didn't believe anything. Okay, maybe. So I asked ChatGPT, did the founding fathers intend on America being a majority white nation? And it says that's an excellent and complex historical question, and the answer depends on which founding fathers you're referring to, and whether you mean intended in a legal, demographic, or social sense. Here's a breakdown. 1. The constitutional and legal intent. The U.S. Constitution does not explicitly state any racial composition goals for the nation. However, it was written within a racialized framework. So I guess Charlie Kirk was correct that the Constitution does not say anything about America being a white nation. But it's nuanced. There's more to it than that. So it says it was written within a racialized framework. The Naturalization Act of 1790, passed by the first Congress, which included many founders, limited U.S. citizenship to free white persons of good character. This suggests that while the Constitution was silent on race, federal law codified the idea of a white citizenry early on. Okay, so I guess that's the framework, that's the racialized framework that it's speaking about. It says enslaved Africans, Native Americans, and most non-white immigrants were excluded from citizenship. So while the founders didn't literally declare America should be a white nation, they established legal structures that favored whiteness as a qualification for belonging. So it may not have been in the Constitution, but it was elsewhere in the law. So while the founders didn't literally declare America should be a white nation, they established legal structures that favored whiteness as a qualification for belonging. Number 2, the founders' views on race and demographics. Different founders expressed different attitudes. Thomas Jefferson, in Notes on the State of Virginia, 1785, wrote that whites and blacks could not coexist in equality, arguing for colonialization of freed blacks elsewhere, implying a desire for a racially homogeneous America. Benjamin Franklin expressed concern that German and other English immigrants might darken America's Anglo character, though he later softened those views. George Washington and James Madison owned enslaved Africans and saw slavery as a problem but didn't advocate racial integration. Alexander Hamilton, by contrast, supported Black soldiers' participation in the Revolution and founded the New York Manumission Society, though even he did not promote racial equality on a national scale. 3. Cultural and political intent. Many of the founders envisioned America as an Anglo-Protestant republic of virtue, modeled on European ideals. Their references to posterity and our descendants in the Declaration and Constitution implicitly meant white descendants, given who was considered a citizen. This worldview has reinforced through immigration policy. This worldview was reinforced through immigration policy and land ownership laws well into the 19th century. And in summary, it says, so while there was no explicit constitutional clause declaring America a white nation, the founding generation's laws, writings, and actions reflected a clear preference for a white European-descended citizenry. That preference shaped early immigration policy and national identity for more than a century, until the civil rights and immigration reforms of the mid-20th century dismantled those racial restrictions. So, off the bat, I think it's fair to say that the founding fathers, for the most part, envisioned America as a white nation. I don't think there's anything, wrong in stating that. I think that is what it is. There's no getting around that. Not all of them, of course, as we just read, not all of them, but enough of them to where it was written into the laws for a while, for a good while. And I think we have to look broader than just the Constitution. And I think that putting it in the legal context is appropriate. I then asked, was the Naturalization Act of 1790 that limited citizenry to just whites? I asked if that act was eventually repealed, and it says yes. The Naturalization Act of 1790 was effectively repealed and replaced several times in the early years of the Republic. Here's a breakdown. The original law in 1790, enacted in March 26, 1790, restricted naturalization to free white persons of good moral character. It required 2 years residence in the U.S. and 1 year in a particular state. It was the first federal law to define who could become a U.S. citizen. It was replaced by the Naturalization Act of 1795, which repealed the 1790 Act. It extended residency requirement to 5 years. It still restricted citizenship to free white persons, and it added an oath to renounce allegiance to one's former nation. The next was the 1798 revision, which was the Alien and Sedition era, and it was the Naturalization Act of 1798. Part of the Alien and Sedition Acts lengthened residency to 14 years. It was highly unpopular and repealed in 1802 under President Thomas Jefferson. Next is the 1802 Act, which is Jefferson's reform. It reinstated 5-year residency and reaffirmed the free white person clause. This framework remained largely intact until after the Civil War. So we are going for a few years now, a few decades, and still the idea of only free white persons being citizens is still reaffirmed in all of these acts, which I think makes it clear that the founding fathers and, politicians and presidents throughout those years still held strong to the idea that America should be for free whites. Next, it says legal changes. In 1870, naturalization was extended to aliens of African nativity and persons of African descent. In 1952, Immigration and Nationality Act abolished racial restrictions entirely. In 1965, Immigration and Nationality Act The Hart-Celler Act ended national origin quotas, fully opening immigration beyond Europe. In summary, it says the Naturalization Act of 1790 was repealed in 1795, replaced by a series of subsequent acts that gradually expanded eligibility, but racial restrictions stayed in place for over 160 years until the mid-20th century. So I think that answers that question. I think it's fair to say a larger portion of the founding fathers likely wanted America to remain a white nation. I think a larger portion of them wanted that than not. I think a large portion of them. I think a very small minority may have been, open to the idea of granting citizenship to others, but I think a large majority wanted it to be for free whites.
What does the phrase e pluribus unum mean? What does the phrase e pluribus unum mean?
Why is that relevant?
Because it was on every founding document and presidential seal from our founding, which means out of many, one. You, sir, and your ideology is not conservative. It is right-wing, identitarian, and has no place in the conservative movement, my friend. Get out of line. Get out of line.
So he brought up the idea of e pluribus unum. And that video was chopped a little bit, and I think so I'm only gonna go off of what I think he was referring to. I think he was continuing in the vein of saying that the phrase e pluribus unum means out of many one, and he was using that as evidence that America was not intended to be a white nation, because in that sense e pluribus unum would not make sense. So that's what I want to respond to, I guess. And the best way to do that is to, once again, ask ChatGPT. And the question is, when did America start using the phrase e pluribus unum? And it says the phrase e pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, was first adopted by the United States in 1782 as part of the design for the Great Seal of the United States. Here's a breakdown of its history. Origins from 1776 to 1782. The phrase was suggested by Pierre Eugène de Samitier, a Swiss-born artist and consultant to the first Great Seal Committee in 1776. It appeared on early drafts of the seal to symbolize the union of the original 13 colonies into a single nation. So I'm going to read that again. It says, it appeared on early drafts of the seal to symbolize the union of the original 13 colonies into a single nation. I guess that was the out of many one meaning. The official adoption was in 1782. The Continental Congress officially approved the Great Seal on June 20th, 1782. E pluribus unum was placed on a scroll in the eagle's beak, where it remains today. Public use and symbolism. The motto appeared on U.S. coins beginning in 1795, though not consistently. It became standard on coins after 1873 and later appeared on paper currency and official documents. The phrase reflects the federal ideal, many states and peoples forming one nation, and later came to represent America's cultural and ethnic diversity as well. So it appears, that in terms of public use, it may have come to be a phrase which was used to represent what it says is the federal ideal of many states and peoples forming one nation, but just in the context of the founding fathers or just the original people that created the seal, I think the meaning of it was just out of many colonies, we are one nation. I think that is what the meaning of it was. But I did continue to ask ChatGPT, I said, was it in contrast to the idea of America being a white nation? Was the idea of using e pluribus unum, kind of a statement being made that America is not a white nation, as I think Charlie Kirk was implying that it meant? And ChatGPT says, excellent question, and one that goes straight to the heart of how American identity evolved. In short, no. When e pluribus unum, out of many one, was first adopted in 1776 to 1782, it was not meant to contrast or challenge the idea of America as a white nation. Instead, it reflected unity among the 13 European colonies, not racial or cultural diversity in the modern sense. It was the union of European colonies. It was, and it did not counter the idea of America being a white nation. It didn't counter or contradict or anything like that. I think it can be seen to have gone hand in hand with it. And again, the racial and cultural diversity meaning behind e pluribus unum is considered a more modern meaning of the phrase. The original meaning, 1776 to 1782, when Congress approved e pluribus unum for the Great Seal in 1782, the phrase symbolized out of many colonies, one nation. The many referred to the 13 states, all of which were founded and governed primarily by white European settlers, mainly British, with Dutch, French, and German minorities. At the time, enslaved Africans, Native Americans, and non-white peoples were excluded from the political definition of the people. So in its founding context, e pluribus unum represented political unity among whites, not racial inclusion. And I see that. I think, if there were non-whites here, their role was to just, be workers of some sort. But absolutely not to be citizens. Their intention was a white society, a white nation. ChatGPT continues, contradiction with the racial order. Even as the motto celebrated unity, the Naturalization Act of 1790 made citizenship available only to free white persons. That law made explicit what e pluribus unum implicitly assumed, that the many were European-descended settlers. So the phrase coexisted comfortably with the racial hierarchy of early America. It was not a moral or racial statement. It was a political slogan for the Union. And that's not surprising given the history of the nation. Given our history, that's not surprising. Reinterpretation over time. By the 19th and 20th centuries, especially after the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, the 14th Amendment, 1868, and immigration reforms, 1870-1965, e pluribus unum began to be reinterpreted to mean out of many peoples, one nation. This modern, inclusive meaning contrasts with the original white nationalist framework. By the mid-20th century, civil rights advocates and presidents alike used it to emphasize racial and cultural diversity as central to American identity, a shift from exclusion to inclusion. So there you have it. Summary. It gives a period and the meaning of e pluribus unum. From 1776 to the 1820s, it represented political union among white colonies or states. In the 1860s to the 1900s, it was unity after the Civil War. And in the 1940s to the present, it's cultural unity amid racial diversity. I guess what I was most intrigued by in the video with Charlie Kirk is just how angry he got with speaking with the guy, just addressing the idea of America being, you know, the original founding fathers' intention of it being a white nation, like just how offended he was at even the thought of it, and just how angry he got with the guy for even bringing it up, because I think it's a fact, you know. And I just didn't understand why he got so angry as to kick homeboy off the line, you know. And the only thing I can think to understand it is that he just doesn't want to have that conversation. I think he knows he's gonna lose that conversation, and he doesn't really want to have it. But he doesn't have to lose the conversation. That doesn't make America a bad place, or, you know, less than whatever Charlie thinks of America, or less than what I think of America. It certainly doesn't lessen what I feel about America, or it does not take away from my American dream, you know, because again, America is a work in progress and it's always being built. And I think that this is one example of that, the idea of e pluribus unum, and how it grew from that idea of a racial identity to, you know, diversity. And so I accept that. And, you know, that to me is a part of America's greatness. That's a representation of a part of America's greatness. So I'm, you know, I don't think we should have to run away from having those conversations.
I want you to listen very, very carefully.
Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. When God spoke his words, they said he was deranged. Marley sung his songs, they said the same. Malcolm X and Martin Luther fought relentlessly so we could be better. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say